has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped in 10th and Ranch Michael Ryder.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Sorry, I had my phone on. How stupid of me. Anyway, it's this is a double header today. This is the second time I've come on the air, and we're covering a case that we covered last year. And to me, this was one of the most horrific cases we covered last year. And it's a young mother. Her name is Eliza Fletcher. And this occurred in Memphis. And she was out jogging at like 4 o'clock in the morning when she was abducted off the street by a convicted felon who had done this before, who had kidnapped someone before and actually did 20 years in state prison for this very same crime. Why he was out is another topic we'll sort of broach later on, but it's just a whole series of events that went so horribly wrong. And when we covered this, to me, here's this woman that was a mother of two. I believe she's 35 years old. She's a kindergarten teacher. And she was actually, not that this matters, she was like the heir to a billionaire's fortune. Her grandfather was Joseph Orgill III, a billionaire who ran Memphis's based hardware distributor, Orgill Incorporated. And in 2021, Forbes listed Orgill as number 143 among the largest private companies in the U.S. So not that that mattered as to what occurred to her, but it's just a horrific thing. This woman had everything to live for. And one of the reasons we do this case today is that prosecutors in Tennessee will be seeking the death penalty against a 39-year-old man accused of kidnapping a kindergarten teacher who was out on an early morning jog last year, and he brutally killed her. LB County District Attorney Steve Mulroy, who staunchly opposes the death penalty as a matter of policy, said that his office would be seeking the death penalty against Cleotha Abston, and now he added another name, Cleotha Abston Henderson. This is a relatively new thing. He was never known as Henderson. He was known as Cleotha Abston. For the 2022 abduction and slaying of Eliza Fletcher, a wife and mother of two children. Abston is accused of severely beating Fletcher, who had multiple fractures to her face, before shooting her in the back of the head, execution style. Shelby County Criminal Court Judge Levy Coffey on Thursday said the manner in which Abston allegedly killed Fletcher was heinous, atrocious, and cruel. The Memphis Commercial Appeal reported. Surveillance video obtained by authorities appears to show Fletcher being forced into a dark-colored SUV around 4 a.m. on September 2nd, 22. I believe it was actually 4:30 a.m. that she was forced into this car, while she was jogging on the 3800 block of Central Avenue near the University of Memphis campus. The footage showed a person exiting the parked SUV as Fletcher passed by, then running toward her, grabbing her and forcing her into the passenger's side door of the vehicle. Authorities said they found evidence of a struggle between Fletcher and her kidnapper. After authorities discovered Fletcher's body on September 5th, Abston was charged with first-degree murder and first-degree murder in the perpetration of kidnapping. He had already been charged the previous day with aggravated kidnapping and unlawful carrying of a weapon. Fletcher's body was found 7 miles from where she was taken in a moderate to advanced state of decomposition, the autopsy report stated. There were two semicircular defects to the skull consistent with a single gunshot wound to the head with the bullet traveling in a posterior to anterior, back to front, and right to left direction, a forensic anthropologist with the West Tennessee Regional Center wrote in a summary of the report. There are fractures to the maxillae consistent with a blunt impact to the central facial area. Prosecutors said they have a plethora of evidence against Abston in addition to the security footage. For example, Abston's DNA was found on a pair of slide sandals recovered from the scene. Abston was allegedly seen on another surveillance video wearing similar slides days earlier. Additionally, data obtained from Abston's cell phone placed him near the intersection where Fletcher was abducted about the time of her disappearance. And his brother allegedly told investigators that Abston was acting very strange when he returned home on September 4th. You know, folks, one of the reasons that we covered this case also was just the heinousness of this crime, but also the outstanding, just amazing police work that was done on this case. And it was done not just by the local police, but by the Memphis State Police as well as the FBI. They had the DNA identified, I believe, in 18 hours. That's amazing. And they had Abston, they were referring to him as Cleotha Abston, now Henderson. They had him identified in 18 hours and made the arrest so quickly. And for the family that we see on the screen right now, they were in deep, deep mourning and in shock. And you could see their faces. They look totally in shock in this photograph that you see on the screen. I think they were told by the police early on that something really, really bad had happened. And this is some footage from CNN from just last year, just around when this occurred.
In the case of the missing woman in Tennessee, police have just identified the body of Eliza Fletcher, a school teacher and a mother of two little children. Fletcher was abducted while jogging early Friday, and now the man charged with first-degree murder just wrapped his first court appearance. CNN's Gary Tuckman is live at the courthouse in Memphis for us at this hour with more on this. Gary, what's the very latest?
Okay, 10 minutes before this arraignment was scheduled for an accused kidnapper, it ultimately became an arraignment for accused murderer. We were informed by the Memphis police that the body that was recovered last night was identified as Eliza Fletcher. Such a sad outcome. This woman who was kidnapped on Friday had been missing since then. But before her body was found, the arraignment was scheduled in the court for Cleotha Abston. We saw him come in. He was wearing a mask. It was hard to tell what his facial expressions were because of the mask, but he looked impassive. He looked impatient. He had handcuffs behind his back. The only thing he said was yes when he had to swear that he did not have enough money to pay for an attorney, so a public defender was given to him. So he was arraigned officially on the kidnapping charges. But then the prosecutor said, Your Honor, we just want to tell you we're also adding a first-degree murder charge to him. The judge said we need to hold another arraignment. That arraignment will take place tomorrow. The prosecutors don't want him to have bail. He has $500,000 bail right now on the kidnapping charge. The prosecutors want it completely revoked. That will be heard tomorrow. But either way, this is a sad and tragic outcome. And this accused murderer is no stranger to jail bars. In the year 2000, he was found guilty of kidnapping another person, kidnapping a man, a lawyer here in Memphis, who escaped. He served 20 years behind bars. He got out of prison in November of 2020, a little less than 2 years ago. And now he's back in jail again, and he will be awaiting a trial ultimately, or plea bargaining perhaps someday. But either way, he's in a lot of trouble because he's now accused of first-degree murder of this 34-year-old mother of two little children, wife, and school teacher. Very sad story case.
Really is horrible. Gary, thank you so much for being there and for your reporting on this. Let's go to Tennessee right now where the Memphis police chief is speaking. Of course.
Now, folks, this is happening. I believe the date would be September 2nd. The incident occurred on September 2nd. This is probably September 3rd, 2022. So this is, a while ago, last year, and it's coming up, of course, almost a year since this occurred.
This is after the The body was identified of the missing teacher, Eliza Fletcher. Let's listen in.
Agencies was nothing less than symphonic. We are also very grateful for the hundreds of tips that came through our Crime Stoppers and other platforms from our citizens at large. Our engaged and supportive community is truly our most valued asset. Just remember that this still is an ongoing investigation. At this time, I would like to bring up FBI Special Agent in Charge, Doug Korneski. Thank you.
I just want to add something before the FBI takes the microphone here. The law enforcement response to this was nothing less than remarkable. They did an unbelievable job. They did it with great speed. They did it with great urgency, and they did it with great professionalism. And I can't say enough. Look, we criticize the police when they do things wrong. It seems seemingly they did everything right in this case.
Good morning. First and foremost, on behalf of the FBI, I want to extend the extreme sympathy and condolences of our office to the family and friends of Eliza. While most of us did not know her prior to this tragedy, through the course of the recent investigation, we got a small glimmer into the light that she was to her family and friends and community. Next, I just want to commend the immense collaborative efforts of the local, state, and federal law enforcement during this investigation. As the family knows, every possible resource that we had as a law enforcement community, to include the FBI, was brought to bear to both find Eliza and her perpetrator and hold him accountable. And then simply lastly, I just want to thank the community for their support during this investigation, the many tips and leads that we received. We are a member of this community as well, and this situation, this tragedy impacts us deeply as well. So with that, I just again want to thank the community. Next, I will be followed by the Acting Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Ali Roberts from ATF.
First, on behalf of ATF, I'd like to extend our deepest condolences to the family and friends affected by this tragedy. No resources were spared to locate and arrest the individual responsible for this incomprehensible violent crime. ATF utilized resources such as assigning special agents, our canine, and utilizing the E-Trace database. We also utilize our expertise as we work with our state and local partners to bring about justice to the family and friends in reference to this tragedy. I would like to bring next up U.S. Marshal Tyrese Miller.
Thank you. Good afternoon. On behalf of the United States Marshal Service, we certainly want to extend our sincere condolences to the family of Eliza Fletcher, her friend.
Folks, I'll just make a comment. You can see how many law enforcement agencies were involved here. The U.S. Marshal Service, they're fantastic. They apprehend some of the most violent felons, at-large felons across the United States, and they assist police departments throughout this nation. And because this is their job, apprehending and investigating, using all the investigative resources necessary to apprehend violent felons, you couldn't have a better teammate on your team. So far, we have the Memphis State Police, the local Memphis Police, we got the ATF, we got the federal marshals, and we have the FBI. So good luck to a criminal that thinks he's going to get away with anything with that type of team going after him.
Friends and family and those that knew her. As I understand it, she touched many lives, and it's certainly a loss. As I've said on numerous occasions, the Marshal Service has a very unique relationship with the Memphis Police Department. At any time they call, we're there to assist. We were glad to receive that call on Saturday when a suspect had been identified. We then went about finding the suspect vehicle in question, as well as the suspect himself. He was spotted, the vehicle was spotted in an apartment complex and we also conducted surveillance on him. And then when he tried to make a move, we went in and made the arrest safely and took him into custody and turned him over to the custody of the Memphis Police Department. And after that, we also participated in the search efforts to find Ms. Fletcher all day Sunday and all day Monday. And as it's been stated, it was not the outcome we were looking for. We were dedicated and committed to continue those search efforts and assist our partners until she was found. Next, I will turn it over to District Attorney General Steve Morrow.
Thank you. Good morning. I also want to add my condolences and the condolences of my office to the family of Eliza Fletcher. To lose someone so young and so vital is a tragedy in and of itself, but to have it happen in this way with a senseless act of violence, it's unimaginable. And we express our deepest condolences. We're praying for them. I'm praying for Eliza, and I'm praying for the family. With respect to the family, both law enforcement and our office was in contact with the family throughout this long weekend. They have been fully cooperative throughout that entire process. And in contrast to whatever baseless speculation you might have seen, we have no reason to think this was anything other than an isolated attack by a stranger. With respect to the family, we were in touch with them, as I said, throughout the course of the weekend. I visited with the family personally over the weekend. I also visited them this morning when we had terrible news to deliver to them. And I have a message from the family that I want to express to all of you, the public, but also the media. Please respect their privacy. Please allow them to grieve. At an appropriate time, they will be making a statement. I believe a written statement will be forthcoming, but we really do ask that you avoid intrusive questioning and respect their privacy. I also want to take this opportunity to commend all of law enforcement, the people behind me and all the agencies they represent. I had the opportunity to go to the command center over the course of the weekend, and I saw with my own eyes the seamless cooperation among all of them. Chief Davis referred to it a moment ago as symphonic. I think that's an entirely appropriate adjective. I watched myself how they cooperated, and I was very impressed with the speed with which they developed leads, the speed with which they turned around test results, the diligence with which they coordinated the search efforts. They're all to be commended. As for our office, the defendant was arraigned this morning on charges of kidnapping and tampering with evidence. He'll be arraigned tomorrow morning on new charges that we now have to bring of first-degree murder, premeditated murder, murder in the course of perpetration of a kidnapping. Any kind of violence, of course, is unacceptable, but repeat violent offenders particularly deserve a strong response, and that's what they'll get from this district attorney's office. We will continue to cooperate with law enforcement and work closely with them, as we already have, so that we can do our best to bring justice to this tragic situation. And I'll end there. I'll note that because this is still an ongoing investigation and a pending case, and I, as a prosecutor, have certain legal limits on what I can say. There are probably limits to what kind of questions that I can answer or that can be answered by anybody. But I'll just end there. Thank you.
This question is for anyone in law enforcement. Do you know a manner of death? A, and B, was she killed in the vehicle?
It's too early for us to determine place and method of death at this point.
So, folks, that was the press conference last September, and it gives us the background of this case, and you can see how absolutely horrific it was. The background in the way that the victim was just out jogging like anyone can do in any place in this world, in any town, any city, and you expect to be safe. in the area in which you live. People criticized, victim shaming, I guess you could say, that she was running at 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the morning, the same route she took every day. To her, this was her town. This was what she did. She was a kindergarten teacher. Just imagine those 5 and 6-year-olds when they had to be told that Miss Fletcher is no longer going to be your teacher. And I don't know what they told them. I don't know if they would tell a 5 or a 6-year-old that your teacher is dead. I'm sure they wouldn't tell them what occurred. However, just imagine those little 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds having to be told that that their teacher is not going to come back. Or even worse, how about her children? She had 2 kids. How about telling her 2 kids that mommy's no longer coming back? And I want to talk a little bit about the perpetrator in this case. His name is Cleotha Abston. Now all of a sudden they've been adding the name Henderson to him. I don't know where that came from, but all of a sudden they're saying Cleotha Abston Henderson. Besides the fact that he did 20 years in state prison for kidnapping and robbing his own attorney, and actually putting him in the trunk of a car, forcing him to give up his PIN number and stealing money from him, he did 20 years for that. He had quite a substantial juvenile record. Now, we're always told now in law enforcement and by the tree huggers that, juvenile records must be sealed. And sometimes for the protection of society, we need to know the criminal history of certain juveniles that turn into serious adult offenders like he did. I believe he was a serial rapist. He raped a man. He raped a boy when he was a juvenile. Think of that. And then he also did another rape approximately a year before this crime. And we'll discuss that later on, because had that been handled correctly, there was a possibility that he could have been in jail or in prison for that. And a big snafu with that was that they used to call it the Vitulo kit. Now that I'm aging myself, now they call it the Sexual Offense Evidence Collection Kit. That kit, which apparently had DNA, was never submitted, or wasn't timely, wasn't submitted till 4 or 5 months after the crime. So in essence, it sat on a shelf somewhere and was never tested. Had it been tested, he would have been identified, and he probably would have been arrested, and he wouldn't have been able to commit this heinous murder, which I believe it was also an attempted rape. And I believe Eliza Fletcher fought like you would not believe for her life, because the coward attacked her physically. And then when she was probably so strong, because she was an athlete and in such good shape, that he shot her in the back of the head with a gun. So just think of the heinousness of this crime. And now we know who he is. Now we know who he is. Then they didn't know who he was. But he was what we would call, and again, juvenile records frequently are sealed, and the powers that be think that that's the right thing to do. And the powers that be perhaps don't believe in incarcerating people like Cleotha Abston Henderson. He didn't belong on the street. He did 20 years for robbery, kidnapping, and was released. I always wanted to know, when we did this show last year, I asked, what was his supervision? Did he have any supervision? Was he on parole? Was he under the spotlight of the criminal justice system? Or was he just allowed to roam free and do what he does, which is commit crime? And we don't even know how many crimes he possibly committed, because apparently he wasn't under the supervision of the criminal justice system. And that is scary. And that's scary because I believe the citizens of that state, the citizens of this country, deserve to be protected by the criminal justice system. Folks, a case like this, I'm all in favor of giving people first, second, third, maybe even a fourth chance. But when someone shows that they're violent and they have a propensity towards violence, and they sort of can't be, their behavior can't be corrected, even though they've spent time in jail and in prison, I think then you have to sort of lock them up and throw away the key. And I know there's many social scientists, and that's not the way these days. Everyone thinks we should be given hugs instead of, for a person like this, I believe that he needs a jail cell. Sizzy Q Down Under, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Very much appreciated. You know, guys, this is such a horrible, horrible case. And I remember when we covered this in September, that we spoke about just how horrific it really was, and how this case is the kind of case that you remember all the time. You know, there's cases from my career in the NYPD that I'll always remember. And some of the ones that you know, they give you pause, and they're in the, you know, like pictures of them flash in front of your eyes every once in a while. This is the type of case that even, you know, in covering these stories, sometimes I feel like that. Even Gabby Petito, there's a case that will stay with you. You know, Kylie Rodney, the girl, the poor 17-year-old girl that drove her car into the lake, that everyone was making all kinds of conspiracy theories about, and she was murdered and this, that, and that. And it turned out, myself and Duty Ron said from day one, no, she drove into the lake. And that was in fact what happened. You know, and so in a case like this, I mean, yeah, it'll stay with you. And we in the criminal justice field, we in the criminal justice business, especially the police, we look at it in a different way. We look at it like a guy like this, that the community, that the good people have to be protected from a predator. This guy's a predator. A predator like this, they need to be protected from him, because he's not going to change. You know, they always said one of the crimes that couldn't be corrected were the crimes of sex offenders, rapists. Like, you couldn't correct their behavior. And if there's any experts in the chat that want to disagree with me or that know more than me about that, I'm certainly no expert on sex crimes. We used to have Manhattan Special Victims, was on the same floor as us, 3280 Broadway on Manhattan, where Manhattan North Homicide was and Manhattan Special Victims. And I would frequently go out with the special victims detectives, and I would talk to them about the crimes of sex offenders and whether there was hope in correcting their behavior. And they sort of painted a bleak picture of it, that it wasn't, you really couldn't correct their behavior. So therefore, long jail sentences, prison sentences had to be their punishment. And then I'm sure there's many people that would disagree with that, but I think that is the reality of that type of crime.
Clear that the location where Eliza Fletcher's body was found was very close in proximity to the home of her accused murder's brother. Let's take a look at the map together. Eliza Fletcher was abducted at 4:20 a.m. in the morning on Friday, September 2nd, from the intersection of Central Avenue and Zach H. Curlin Street near the University of Memphis campus. Her body was located by law enforcement at an abandoned home, which was about 7.5 miles away from where she was abducted, and this is in South Memphis. The affidavit for Cleotha Henderson's arrest states that he was seen at his brother's home, which was just half a mile from the site where Eliza's body was found around 7:50 a.m. And just hours after the abduction, he was cleaning out his car. That affidavit says that 2 witnesses, including his brother, told police he was cleaning the GMC Terrain with floor cleaner, washing his clothing in the sink at home, and acting strangely. And today, WREG obtained surveillance video that shows Cleotha Henderson cleaning out his vehicle, his car, the Terrain. Now, if you watch this video closely, you can see that black GMC Terrain pull into a spot in the parking lot of the Longview apartment complex, again, where the defendant's brother lives. And then he exits the vehicle and returns to clean it. There you can see on the video on your screen as he is right there exiting. You can see him in this video. Let's bring in now our own law enforcement experts joining us in Nashville, Tennessee, retired sergeant for the Nashville Police Department.
You know, lucky that these guys are not masterminds of criminality. That they're not the smartest. They're not the smartest people. You know, here he is, you know, being seen all over video, cell phone, all kinds of evidence. He leaves his sliders on the scene with his DNA in it. I mean, it's almost like, you know, leaving a note there. Yeah, this is who I am. This is where I live. Come get me. You know, so much evidence was left on the scene here. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. Ring my bell, right? And if you want to support us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with count of 5 different levels, and you see the folks in the green font. They're part of our YouTube channel members, part of our family. While I'm just speaking to all you guys, I want to wish Lieutenant Peter Pranzo, and I know it's not his birthday yet, his birthday's Sunday. I want to wish Lieutenant Peter Pranzo, Harlem Raiders, legendary Lieutenant Pete of the Street Crime Unit, 3-2 Precinct. Happy birthday, many more, Lieutenant. It's my pleasure to know you and to be able to wish you a happy birthday. So, guys, you know, one of the reasons we're doing the show, of course, today is that they've decided to, well, the law is, and the judge said that in his statement, they're going to go for the death penalty in this case. Now, the district attorney, who you saw giving a statement on the screen before, he spoke about his, here he is, there's a picture of him right there. I believe his name is ADA Mallory. And he spoke about his resistance and his, he's not a proponent of the death penalty. And having said that, he made some, well, what I thought was a little bit of a political statement, but that's okay. That he thinks it's more effective, a sentence of life without parole. So he basically said that even though his name is D.A. Mulroy. That's him on the right, these 2 gentlemen on the right. Now, one of the problems I have with life without parole is it seems like life without parole doesn't mean that anymore. We've seen in the last few years people that had been given life without parole being released all the time. Cop killers, too. In New York State, we've seen cop killers that were never, ever supposed to get out of prison released. And their sentence was life without parole. They didn't get the death penalty. So does life without parole, does it really mean that? And that's one of the things those of us in policing, we question. Does life without parole really mean that? Or are you just saying that to appease the population when there's a heinous crime such as we just saw in this situation?
Melissa Pinkleton, and in Atlanta, Georgia, former special agent in charge with the Bureau of Investigation in the state of Georgia, Trebor Randall. Thank you both for joining us today. This is, to me, one of the most frightening cases because statistically we know all too often crimes are committed at the hands of people that know the victim. But in this case, at this point in time, it appears to be a stranger. The defendant is a stranger. Yes, he's presumed innocent, but at this point in time, he is in jail without bond for the kidnapping and murder. So let's talk first about that aspect of it. Melissa, what are your thoughts when you hear stranger?
My thoughts are that first, the police did a really good job tracking this guy down very quickly. He knew the route that she ran. They were able to go ahead and track that route, get the cameras along that route, and figure out who this was quickly and get to him quickly and get him arrested for those kidnapping charges.
And you're right, it has happened so quickly. But Trevor, the other thing that I like to see happen is it continues to unfold. We're learning about more and more of the evidence that law enforcement put together, from the shoes with his DNA that were found where she was abducted to.
This case was probably the fastest I've ever seen DNA processed in my life. It seems like they had the DNA back in 18 hours. I've never, ever seen that before in my entire life. And it's amazing if they can do that. You're like, wow. And I don't know if they have a special machine that can process it and compare it against CODIS, because there's no doubt he was in CODIS, which is the combined DNA index system that is run by the FBI. So if was his DNA lifted off those sliders that were left on the scene of the crime, and was it compared and matched that quickly? Just incredibly amazing. And the police work, and the two people on the show are talking about, was incredible. The police work was nothing less than incredible in this case. An arrest in less than 24 hours for a horrific crime. Something that every police department in this entire country could be proud of. The Memphis police and the FBI, the ATF, the felony enforcement unit, the apprehension unit. I'm saying it wrong right now, but fugitive enforcement. There you go. I knew it was one of those. The Fugitive Enforcement Division. All of those law enforcement entities played a part and did an incredible job.
To this video that we have been showing. So Trevor, look at this video and tell me, what are your thoughts about the investigation as you're watching this additional piece of information? And I may not have Trevor at the moment. So Melissa, let me ask
I'm
you.
here, actually.
Okay, great. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you. So yes, tell us your thoughts on the investigation and that video that we were just watching.
I think, as she already alluded to, this came down to, good old-fashioned police work. Also, there was a forensic component, but not only them knowing her route, but also I believe the area that the remains were recovered in, that is usually going to be an area that's known to the suspect. It wasn't that far from where the brother lived, where he was seen cleaning out his car. And trying to clean his clothes as well. So I think piecing together those things from the area of the route that she was running to where the remains were discovered, and being able to triangulate that to where the brother of the suspect lived. This is painstaking work, around the clock, very little sleep, but basically piecing these things together, and especially having witnesses, not necessarily eyewitnesses, but witnesses to his, behavior that was described as abnormal, and also the cleaning of the vehicle, which indicates he was trying to hide evidence.
So many different things that are coming together. And I think, significant to me, we talk about the legal aspect of this and probable cause and the arraignment. Those are the first steps when a defendant has been charged with a crime. And it's based on probable cause that that person committed these particular crimes with which they've been charged. In this case, Cleotha's been charged with the kidnapping as well as the murder and one other charge, tampering with evidence for this young lady. But tell me about your expertise, the law enforcement piece, because Melissa, as we're watching and talking to Chanley, literally right before she comes on air, she sees the police officers come with another person with some cutouts of what look like the shoes, and the person talking about where he located those in the road. And this is after the defendant's been charged. Is that typical?
It's not necessarily typical. I don't know if they were just there paying their respects, because you said they had a cutout pair, or if they were doing a walkthrough perhaps. So, it depends on what they were there for.
Folks, I'm just going to add a little in here. Every crime scene, especially a crime scene like this, needs to be searched. Nothing can be overlooked in a crime scene. So someone saw these sliders, could they have overlooked that? Yeah, they could just say someone just threw them out of their car or something. But a sharp detective, a sharp investigator will not overlook that. Say a smoked cigarette butt. That might be something, could be evidence also that you want to grab that and swab it for DNA. Very possible. All of these things, that is police procedure, an investigative procedure. And we have some good detectives even in the chat. Detective Scotty Wagner from El Barrio and the 2-3 and Manhattan North Homicide Squad. That's part of police procedure. Investigative procedure is to search that crime scene and then to do what's called a canvass. And not just a canvass, in speaking with people, which is so important. This was just on the outskirts of the University of Memphis. So not just a speaking to people, door-to-door canvass, canvassing around, but a video canvass and see if any of this, and it turned out that some of this was caught on video, including the perpetrator getting out of his SUV and approaching Eliza. So all of this was, you put it together and it tells a story. And I'm not making light of it. The police did an unbelievable job. The defendant's cell phone. Again, every case we have from Brian Koberger till Alec Murdoch, Gabby Petito, Kylie Rodney, a cell phone comes into play. Digital evidence comes into play somewhere. And that is also true with this case. So none of these things can ever be overlooked because it's so important. It's a huge part of investigation. And I know I say ad nauseum that investigation is an art and a science. And the art of it is doing the police work, getting out, walking on those streets, knocking on doors, talking to people, determining what is evidence, doing the computer checks, finding out who is in the area, talking to people. Maybe someone saw something. That's the art of investigation. The science, collecting the DNA, collecting evidence, processing the perpetrator's car. There's the science, the crime scene technicians, the CSI people, processing the defendant himself, swabbing him for DNA, his clothing, finding his clothing, trace evidence. Could Eliza Fletcher's blood be on his clothing? That's called transfer evidence. So all of these things, that's the science. The cell phone technology is the science of investigation. And of course, we mentioned the DNA. So the art and the science, put them together with the great law enforcement entities we had working this case, and it's a powerful tool, a tool that no criminal is going to defeat. And I say that with great confidence because they did an unbelievable job in this case.
She couldn't quite nail down what they were doing there. Typically, somebody involved will go through a walkthrough. However, if that's not it, they might have just been there helping them pay their respect. And that's a possibility too.
That's a really great point. We don't know exactly what they were doing there. Trebor, we do know that this defendant, again, presumption of innocence, but he is facing these charges. He is in jail without bond, presumption of innocence. However, tell me this. What do you think? What does law enforcement do with the fact that we know he served 20 years for a similar crime, a kidnapping, years ago?
Again, it's just disheartening the more that, this case unfolds and unravels and you find out about this suspect's past. I say often that, past behavior is often indicative of what someone is going to do in the future.
You know something? She took the words right out of my mouth. That was wonderful because I've heard people that are not in the crime fighting business or in criminal justice say, oh, what does the guy's criminal history have to do with anything? She just said it, that past behavior is so indicative of future behavior. And she took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you.
And again, with narcotic investigations, we were often able to introduce what we call similar transactions, crimes that were similar in the past. I think that, that's going to be a stretch, but if they're able to introduce that, this person has been convicted of kidnapping before, has served time in prison, and probably now is indicating they probably never should have let him out. And he just did what predators do, it appears, if he is in fact guilty of this crime.
A predator. It's just a terrible case. Today, it became clear that the location
So unbelievable, guys. And they use the same language that I used. Yeah, he's a predator. There's no doubt. Predators prey on people. And that's, if law enforcement can't protect you from these people and the district attorneys won't prosecute some of these, in some states, they're looking to give people second, third, fourth, fifth chances because they don't want to incarcerate people. And I think that that's a little scary in this day and age. When you have people like this out there, you want to make sure that law enforcement does their job. And it's just, it's heartbreaking to see that a woman like this lost her life over this. And, you see even certain shows, TV shows, they don't understand the criminals, the way you do when you've spent thousands of hours with criminals over your police career, the way Lieutenant Peter Pranzo understands it, the way Scotty Wagner understands it. You look at someone like Cleotha Abston Henderson, and you understand that the way they described him is a predator. He's a predator. And now the big thing, the big question in this case is they're going to go for the death penalty. And the district attorney, Mulroy, on moral grounds and on political grounds, doesn't agree with it. However, he understands that he's not the legislator. He did not make these laws, but he has to enforce them. And, when we spoke about, I'd like to take a quick little poll in the chat. If you agree in this case with the death penalty, put a 1 in the chat. If you're against the death penalty, in this case or any other case, put a number 2 in the chat. I'm just curious as to how our audience feels about the death penalty. One of the problems these days with the death penalty, of course, is a defendant will stay on death row for what seemingly is forever. It could take 25 to 30 years for all the appeals to be exhausted. So it takes so many years to actually enforce the death penalty, because again, they get unlimited appeals. It looks like our panel here only one anti-death penalty person. And I can understand why, whatever, if you have, philosophical reasons for not wanting the death penalty, whatever your reason being, but it's, and also even the reason I just brought up is that if they get an endless amount of appeals, is it really serving its purpose? Carmelita says she repeated Hammurabi's code. And Hammurabi's code, of course, we all learned that in criminal justice, is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That goes back to many centuries ago. Hammurabi's code. 2 people out of the Judith Lyons. I'm sorry, I don't mean to point you out, but the chat is open. So most of you guys are pro death penalty. That's fine. Especially in a case like this, it's so horrific. Eric Olson, that needs to change. Sergeant Bill, I one appeal, no new evidence, get it over with. Well, it just seems like there's endless appeals, and it would cost the government millions of dollars to enforce. Gene Barker, anti-death penalty. Linda Uribe, I agree with you. A cop's wife, the death penalty is a good bargaining tool to get them to plead guilty. I mentioned that in the Brian Koberger case, the Idaho case, Ethan Chapin, Zana Knodel, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalves, that there's a possibility that the prosecution could go to the defense with a plea deal, life without parole instead of the death penalty. And I'm not saying they're going to, I'm just saying the possibility exists that they could go for that. Will they do that? I don't know, but a very good chance. Frank Marshall, I caught an inmate trying to escape him. When he was questioned, he said he had no one on the outside anymore, and all his friends from outside were also gone. He was called a state puppy. You know, some people get institutionalized, and jail or prison is all they know. And they're actually more comfortable in jail or in prison than they are on the outside, because they never learned how to survive on the outside. And that's a huge factor too. Let me play a little of this from Court TV.
Why? Why would you do this? To what point? Then here we're talking about someone who spent time in prison, decades in prison, and you get out, and that's where you want to go back to? I don't understand.
See, he clearly does not understand criminals. He's baffled as to why this guy did this. He just doesn't understand. He doesn't get it. He doesn't get that there are people on this earth that are just no good. They're bad, and you're not going to change their behavior. He just did 20 years. He just get out in 2020. This crime occurred in 2022. He just did 20 years in state prison, and he's doing the same exact crime that he got convicted for and did 20 years for. And let's not forget his juvenile record. So this gentleman here is acting baffled because he hasn't spent thousands of hours with criminals.
Understand that. So this hour, we're going to try to understand that. First, though, we've got to go through this story, the evidence, to figure out exactly what happened. And then at the end of this hour, we're going to try to talk about why. Why would someone do this? Especially someone who has spent time behind bars, locked up. Unreal. Here's the Memphis police chief talking about the discovery and the recovery of Eliza Fletcher.
Today is a very sad day in the city of Memphis. First, I'd like to express our sincere condolences to the family, friends, and numerous others who have been impacted by the...
Again, folks, this happened September 2022, just in case this isn't live. This happened September 2022.
Tragic and heinous kidnapping of Eliza Fletcher. Yesterday evening, September 5th, at approximately 5:07 p.m., the Memphis Police Department and other law enforcement partners discovered the remains of a human body, in the rear of a vacant duplex apartment at the 1600 block of Victor Street. At that time, it was believed the unidentified body could possibly be the remains of kidnapping victim Eliza Fletcher. Further forensic investigation by the MPD traffic unit positively identified the body was, in fact, Eliza Fletcher. Cleotha Abston has been charged by MPD homicide investigators with the following state charges: first-degree murder and perpetration of kidnapping, especially aggravated kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. In addition, Abston has been charged with the following unrelated offenses: identity theft, theft of property, and credit card fraud. While the outcome of this investigation is not what we hoped for, we are nonetheless pleased to remove this dangerous predator off the streets of Memphis.
Remove him off the streets of Memphis again. I think is more correct. Again. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Shanley Painter, joining us live tonight from the scene where Eliza's remains.
You know, folks, one of the things that I wanted to mention is that, and I mentioned it earlier on in the show, but now it becomes so much more important, is that he had committed a rape earlier in 2021. And the sexual offense evidence collection kit that was collected from that case was never submitted. So in essence, it sat on a shelf for about, and I don't have the exact amount of time, for 4 or 5 months. And had that sexual offense evidence collection kit been submitted in a timely manner, there was a very good possibility that Cleotha Abston Henderson, that's his new name, would have been in jail or in prison awaiting trial on that. And would they have given him bail? Doubtful they would have given him bail. But then you also realize in certain jurisdictions like New York now, they're bailing all kinds of dangerous criminals now. And again, if I'm getting political, I'm getting political because that really is scary when you see, again, even the chief of Memphis used the word predator. When you see a predator like this roaming the streets, and he should have been in prison or jail again because he committed another rape. Again, a mistake by law enforcement that they did not submit the sexual offense evidence collection kit in a timely fashion. So I just thought I would bring that up.
Remains were found in Memphis, Tennessee. Chanley, great to see you tonight. What's the latest where you are? I can see some balloons over your right shoulder. Police investigators still there. What's going on?
The police investigators actually cleared this scene earlier this afternoon, Vinny. So I'm standing right now where the body of Eliza Fletcher was discovered yesterday by the Memphis Police Department. So this vacant house behind me is where the FBI led the investigation. You can see, of course, the memorial that's growing with balloons and teddy bears and flowers. It's here at the house. It's also on the street corner to my left. But according to the affidavit, Vinny, this house tipped off the investigators. They first talk about this tall grass that you see when the driveway ends. And of course, to my left, there were tire tracks in this grass, which led them to move towards the back of this home. Once you go to the back of the home to my left, there's another door with some steps like this behind me. According to the affidavit, they located the body of Eliza Fletcher on the other side of those steps, sort of concealed by the back of this house, some steps, and this very, very taller than me grass vacant lot to my left. I'm in South Memphis. This is where I'm located, the corner of Person Avenue and Victor Street, Vinny. And again, this was the site that the remains were located. I've been here most of today. A lot of community members are driving through this area because they know this is where she was found. So they're leaving, of course, the flowers, balloons. They just want to see what it looks like. I've talked to several of them.
You know, just a horrific thing. Here's a pillar of the community, a kindergarten teacher, a mother from a prominent family. And not that that means anything in this case, but just a great woman. New York Turtle 89, thank you for the $10 super sticker. Here's a contribution so you don't whack me in the Lone Star State. As I'm straight out of Brooklyn, I left 12 years ago, never went back. Keep up the excellent, honest work. New York Turtle 89, thank you so much. Always good to know that there's members of the service stretched all over this great country of ours, all different states. Former NYPD are all over the place. It's I like to be around other cops. As I get older, I really appreciate being around other cops, and it doesn't happen often. But going to events and talking to guys and see what they did after the job. The job is known as the NYPD, of course, and knowing what they did after the job and to keep in contact with as many of them as possible. It's just a great thing. Folks, if you're looking for a great defense attorney in the New York metropolitan area, then Joe Murray, counselor at law, is your man. Joe's a retired NYPD police officer, member of the service. You can reach Joe on his cell phone at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com. And he's also got a website, jmurray-law.com. Joe Murray is a great supporter, contributor to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. And we stick together, and we appreciate all you guys. I also appreciate all you guys that support this show. And I'm seeing some names, some new names out there that I haven't seen in a while. And it's so great to see all you guys. H. Cook, Florida also hides juvenile records. It seems to be it's a look. If at any time you can save someone, it's got to be when they're young, when they're juveniles. But what from we in the police business, though, that a lot of juveniles have already gotten pretty far in their criminal career by very young ages. But if there's any time you can correct their behavior, and any time they're worth saving, and you would try to help them save them. Look, the NYPD boxing is a great example of that. They have boxing gyms all over the city, and they're cops giving up their time, to try to save these kids. And I can't tell you how many kids they've saved. And the guys who have taken part in this are just unbelievable. It brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. These guys have helped these kids out, the inner city community, inner city kids, and they take these kids in like they're their own kids, and they use boxing as a tool for these kids to get out of. H. Cook, yeah, all are worth saving, no doubt. I didn't mean to. I misspoke. They're all worth saving. Some are more difficult to save than others, But yeah, they're absolutely all worth saving, and you want to get them before they get older and they become adults, because then it's nearly impossible to save them once they become adults and they get into that adult prisons instead of juveniles. And although juvenile facilities are just as bad as state prisons sometimes. So I didn't mean to say they're not worth saving. You're 100% right. They're all worth saving.
Most of them are saying just how shocked and disturbed that this happened in their hometown. I'm about to talk to a woman who's here now who said that she and her goddaughter drove around this area just searching while Miss Fletcher was missing for several days, had a hunch that something was happening in this area because that's where the suspect who had been arrested on Saturday lived close by. His brother did, Vinny, and they said they were really tipped off by the smell, this pungent smell, odor of decay, which, as I even stand here now, you can catch glimpses of that odor. It's just a very solemn, disturbing scene.
Absolutely. Well, let's start first by talking about the victim, Eliza Fletcher. What can you tell us about her? I spoke a lot in the top about her being a mother, and that was the first thing that caught my attention. Tell us about her.
Yeah, Vinny, she was a 34-year-old mother, devoted wife, a churchgoer. She was a kindergarten teacher at St. Mary's Episcopal School here in Memphis. She loved her classmates. Her school sent out statements today honoring her life, how heartbroken they are. Her family sent a statement, how heartbroken. Of course, the family is asking for privacy to grieve. She was someone known to sing to her students. So her school this morning sang This Little Light of Mine in honor of her during their chapel this morning.
14.
And when she went missing, this was something running. She did every morning, Vinny, when I was at the site of her abduction, which is about 20 minutes from here. I'll be there the next hour on your show to show you that. I ran into her neighbor who lives 3 doors down from where she lives with her 2 boys, and he was hanging a wreath at the intersection where she was abducted in the early morning hours on Friday morning. He said she would run every morning. That was her routine. She was training for the Boston Marathon. He told me that she was a, quote, amazing, amazing, amazing person. He told me to drive by her home, Vinny, because if you drive by her home, instead of the formal dining room in the front of her house, you see a playroom. You can see crafts hanging on the window. You can see a big sandbox that was out front, her front door. Instead of a flower bed, it's a sandbox. There's toys in the front yard. It just compounds the tragedy of this case, knowing that her priority, it seemed, was her students, of course, and her children and her family and her home.
Yeah, you talk about, we talk about school teachers all the time, right? And this is someone who, you have your own children and then all the kids at school as well who were like her children. Let's talk about now Friday morning and what happened and what we know about the timeline of events here.
Well, she was last seen around 4 a.m. at the intersection, again, about 20 minutes.
Well, folks, I just wanted to sort of cover this case today because it was announced today that the prosecution is going to go for the death penalty in this case against Cleotha Abston Henderson, who's been arrested and charged with first-degree murder in this case that occurred back in September 2022. And we want to honor the life of Eliza Fletcher. You can see what a great person she was, missed, loved by many people. And the other thing is when we highlight cases like this, I just want to say it's always great to be able to highlight great police work, which was done during this case. Fantastic police work. I don't think you can do any better on a case like this than Memphis Police, FBI, ATF, Fugitive Enforcement. If I left anyone out, I apologize. They did an unbelievable job on this case. Folks, that's about it. Duty Ron is going live at 8:30 with Ed Wallace, and they're going to cover some of the forensic evidence in the Brian Kohberger case. The defense is coming up with a lot of different things. They're focusing on the training that the investigators received in this case and whether the training was adequate, whether they knew what they were doing. Why did they just focus on Brian Kohberger? So Duty Ron and Ed Wallace on Forensic Friday with Crime Time with Duty Ron are going to focus on that. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. And this was a double header for me. I did Coffee with Cannon this afternoon, so I had enough of live on YouTube. Folks, have a fantastic weekend. Thank you so much for your support for Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. Have a great weekend and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.